ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिः यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैर्तुष्टुवांसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति नः इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नः तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्ददातु ॐ शान्तिः 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 यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रक्षुप्तां सन्दीपयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वधाम्ना अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम् लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाबोधं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to friends who have joined for the 47th session of Upanishad Chintana. And we are, as you know, contemplating on Atharvana Upanishad, also called Mundaka Upanishad. We've been doing it for a good 1.5 years now, and coming to the tail end of this Upanishad. So, just before we get started, let's think about the Rishi, Angira, Satyavaha, Angirasa, Shuanaka, and all the Acharyas. Devata is Aksharanamaka Paramatma, and the Chandas is Anushtup and others. Yeah. So where are we now? Tritiya Mundake, Pratama Kandaha. So we have taken a break for about 3 weeks now, and I hope you've all rested, and I've also had an opportunity to do a bit of revision. So some of us in the satsang have been traveling quite a lot, and we all came back to our home base about a few days ago, and I hope we have also rested quite well. So, we are doing our pravesha into the Tritiya Mundake Pratama Kandaha. Let's do a bit of a revision before we go into the last two verses or 2.5 verses. So, with the last 2.5 verses, we will finish this particular Pratama Kandaha of the Tritiya Mundake. But let's think about what is the philosophy that is being discussed. Dvasuparna Sayuja Sakaya Samana Vriksham Parishashvadrate Tayoranyaha Pippalam Swadati Anashnananyaha Abhichakashiti. So that was the starting point of this particular section of the Upanishad. It started off, the previous section discussed a lot about Antaryamin philosophy. That there is this body, inside this body is the Jivatma, inside the Jivatma is the Paramatma. That Paramatma is called Antaryami in the Upanishads. Yeah. Yeshata Atma Antaryami Amrutaha, as Antaryami Brahmanam or Brihadaranyaka Upanishad discusses in so many verses about this Antaryamin. Okay. So there itself there is a difference. If there is Jivatma and inside Jivatma is a Paramatma, then there itself there is a difference. Only if there is, you can enter into something, only if there is something and there is something else that enters into it. They both can't be one and the same. They have to be two different entities is a given. Okay. But this particular section starts off with this Niravakasha Shruti. Okay. So who is going to tell us very, very quickly what is the difference between Niravakasha Shruti and Savakasha Shruti? So who is going to give us that quick answer?
In Savakasha Shruti, there is two possible or more possible interpretations, whereas in Niravakasha Shruti, there is only one possible interpretation. So there is no doubt.
Beautiful, Sushiji. Well done. Yeah, perfect answer. So this is one of those Niravakasha Shrutis. Yeah. Dva, Suparna, Sayuja, Sakaya, Samana, Vriksham, Parishashvajate, Tayoranyaha, Pippalam Swadati, Anashnananyaha, Abhichakashiti. We have spent weeks celebrating this verse, but think about the Sanskrit singular, dual, and plural. Most languages have only singular and plural, whereas Sanskrit is one of those unique languages where you have singular, dual, and plural. Okay, so here you should never forget these two. Dvau, Suparnau. Now means also Suparna is Suparnau. Suparnau means two types of birds. Two species, two different species of two birds are residing in this vriksha, which is the body. Okay, so that is the view there, and go back and think about that verse. But that first two words, Dvau Suparnau, itself is very significant, and it categorically establishes the difference between Jiva and Paramatma. Okay, the Suparnas that have been described there are two birds, and these birds are sentient beings. There are two sentient beings that are being described. two different types of sentient beings. Yeah, it's only the sentient beings that can experience. So that is where the second line becomes important. Tayor anyaha pippalam swadati. There is one bird which is enjoying this bitter fruit. Anashnan anyaha abhichakashiti. There is another bird which is just a silent witness, and it is self blissful. Okay, so it's only the sentient beings that can feel like this, not the mind and the jiva, as some philosophers think this verse to be, which is not the interpretation that Angira wants us to contemplate on. What Angirasa is saying is there is the jiva and there is the Paramatma. They are there in this body. So what is happening to this jiva? That is the next verse. Samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha anishaya shochati muhyamanaha jushtam. So this is the first half. Let's look at this first half. Samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha anishaya shochati muhyamanaha. So this particular bird, which is in this body, but it is sunk in samsara. Nimagnaha, it is sunk in samsara. It is being pulled down like a whirlpool in this ocean called the samsara. Why is it being pulled? Because it cannot control its destination. We think we do, but actually we don't. Because we don't, it creates all sorts of problems for us in our samsara. Anishaya. So it is not able to control its destination. Shochati. And it is suffering. And it is, going through various ups and downs of life. Full of delusions. Muhyamanaha. Okay. Samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha anishaya shochati muhyamanaha. That is talking about the jiva bird that is there in this vriksha. So what is the solution for this jiva bird? Yeah. The next line gives a beautiful answer to this. Jushtam yada pashyati anyamisham asya mahimanam iti vita shokaha. This jiva can have a solace and a solution for its problems only when it turns inwards and sees the other bird, anyam. Okay, these are all categorical verses of difference. There is no way in which you can see Aikya in these verses. Some people try to do that, but there is no way. If one looks at these verses carefully, there is no way you can see Aikya, because Anya means different. Who is this Anya? He is the Isham, the one that controls this bird. The Paramatma who controls the Jivatma. Only when this Jiva looks inwards and starts understanding that there is the Isha, who is its Antaryamin, and that this is a great guy who is inside me. Asya Mahimanam. When he understands the greatness of this Antaryamin who is inside him, who is his controller, then there is a solution for it to remove its shoka, vita shokaha. Then it can remove its shoka. So what happens when this jiva turns inwards and reaches a stage called the aparoksha jnana, and it sees this antaryamin? Yada pashyaha pashyate. When this jiva sees this antaryamin, who is this antaryamin? Rukmavaranam, who is of the golden hue. And we have understood that golden hue means knowledge. He is full of knowledge. He is sarvajna. He is omniscient. Kartaram, he is omnipotent. Isham, he is the controller. He is the Purusha, Purna Shadgunatvat Purushaha. Brahma Yonim, he is the creator of this universe. From him comes the Chaturmukha Brahma, and so on and so forth. Brahma Yonim Janmadhyasya Yataha. Tada Vidwan, when he knows that and when he sees this Paramatma who is Rukmavarana, Kartaram, Isham, Purusham, Brahmayonim, Tada Vidwan. That is when this person is called a Vidwan or an Aparoksha Jnani. What happens to him at that point? Punya Papa Vidhuya. All his karmic imprints, be it bad karmic imprints or karmic imprints that is not required for his spiritual elevation. There could be karmic imprints that is good for his material progression. He loses those kind of karmic imprints and all the other bad karmic imprints and becomes what? Niranjanaha. Anjana means defects. Niranjana means in his linga sharira there is no karmic imprints, because Paramatma, because of his grace, he removes the karma. And then what happens? He attains Paramam Samyam Upaiti. So we understood that Paramam Samya at that point, not that we and God become one, or that our intensity of blissful experience becomes one with Him. No, there is an element of similarity. What is that Paramasamya that Angirasa is talking about? Dukkha Abhava Samsara Rahita. Paramatma has never been in samsara. Paramatma never has dukkha. So the soul also in liberation reaches that state where it never has any dukkha. Okay? Shoka Rahita. Yeah, that is what is called Shukram. Shukram in the Upanishad is Shoka Rahita. Okay? Samsara Rahita never comes back into the material world. That is the only similarity that we can talk about, but not that me and Paramatma become the one, or the intensity of his bliss is the same as mine. His Paramatma's blissfulness is in entirely different league. We cannot even think about what his blissfulness is. For us, there may be a quantum of bliss, okay, but we are not similar in that. Is one view is the view in Tattvavada. Others have a different view on this. But from looking at this verse, Angirasa seems to imply that Paramasamya is Dukkha, Abhava, and Samsara Rahita. Okay, who is this Paramatma? Prano hi esha sarva bhutair vibhati vijanan vidvan bhavate nativadi atma kridaha atma ratihi kriyavan esha brahmavidam varishtaha. Okay. So it goes on. The next few verses, we understood that it celebrates who this Paramatma is. Then it introduces the philosophy of Prana Tattva. That becomes important. And as we have discussed so many times, the prana is described everywhere in the Upanishad. Okay. It depends upon the person who looks at it. Okay. So if we have preconceived ideas and we look at the verses, then we don't see it. But we have an open mind and read the Upanishads as they tell us. Yeah. That is called Pustaka. There are two things, Mastaka and Pustaka. Mastaka means what preconceived ideas that we have in the mind. Pustaka is what is there in the Vedas. What we should do is we should see what is the Pustaka is saying, rather than have preconceived ideas in our Mustaka, which is the mind, and try and fit the ideas in the Upanishad. That should never be done. We don't do it in our professional lives. Similarly, we should do that in our spiritual lives. So when we look at that, what is this Pustaka saying? Pranaha. So does all the Upanishads, including the 10 Upanishads and everywhere in the Vedas, prana is described quite a lot, and we have discussed that a number of times. So the philosophy of prana gets introduced in this section of this particular khanda. Prano hi esha. So we understood who is that prana. There are various types of pranas in the Upanishad. The pranasya pranaha is the Vishnu himself. Then there is the Madhyama prana, who is also sometimes described as Mukhya prana, who is celebrated in all the Upanishads. He is the Abhimani, that is the Vayu Tattva is the prana there. Okay. Satyena labhyaha tapasahi esha atma samyak jnanena brahmacharyena nityam antah sharire jyotirmayohi shubbraha yam pashyanti yatayaha kshina doshaha. So after prana, Angirasa introduces the concept called satya. And again, we have now, I think in our satsang, we are all experts on what prana and what satya actually means. Satya means not just truth. Satya is the name of Paramatma. Satya is the name of Vishnu as described in Vishnu Sahasranama. And there is a whole lot of etymology around Satya that we have discussed when we kind of tackled this particular verse. So this Paramatma, this Aparoksha Jnana can be achieved only by His grace. Yeah. Satyena Labhyaha. Okay. And then the next verse then reminded us, Satyameva Jayati na Anrutam. Satyena Pantaha Vitato Devayanaha. Yena Akramanti Rishayohi Aptakamaha. Yatra Tat Satyasya Paramam Nidanam. Very beautiful verse. Satyameva Jayati na Anrutam. He who will follow Satya, he who follows Paramatma. Prana Tattva or Vayu is also called Satya in the Upanishads. So he who follows Vayu, he who follows Paramatma is always victorious. Na Anrutam. Not the ones who follow the Asuras. Anrutam and Rutam, we understood there. It's got so many meanings. And one of the meanings is Ruta means that which is eternal. There are so many things that are eternal. Paramatma is eternal. Mula Prakriti is eternal. Chetana Prakriti is eternal. Jivas are eternal. Varanas are eternal. Vedas are eternal. They are all called Rutams. Okay. Anrutam is that which is non-eternal, may be called Anrutam in one sense. So, but Brahmaiva Rutam, Anyad Anrutam says Rigveda. Brahma Eva Rutam. Brahma means there are so many Brahmas in the Upanishads. They are the Rutams. Okay. So we understood that how we follow the path of Satya, which is Mukhya Prana, Vayu, Tattvavada, and we follow that Vishnu, then we are always victorious, is what this verse very beautifully says. And then that Satya is then qualified. Who is this Satya? Brihachatad Divyam, Achintya Rupam, Sukshmat cha Tat Sukshmataram Vibhati, Durat Sadure, Tad Iha Antikecha, Pashyatsu Ihahaiva Nihitam Guhayam. So this guy is huge, he is pure, he is full of knowledge, he is full of bliss. He can be farther than the farthest and he can be the closest to you. Don't search for him everywhere outside. Search for him inside because he's inside you as your Antaryamin. That becomes important. Pashyatsu Iha Eva Nihitam Guhayam. So those are all the words that we did before we kind of took a break early part of February. So then what we did, na chakshusha grihyate napi vacha, na anyair devair tapasa karmanava, jnana prasadena vishuddha sattva, tatastu tam pashyate nishkalam dhyayamanaha. This is the verse that we were doing before we took that break for 3 weeks. Unknowability of no Brahman and knowability of Brahman. This is a big discussion in Vedanta, big discussions in Brahma Sutra. Yeah. Ikshatehe na ashabdam. That is how Acharya will split that sutra. Some folks understand it differently. Okay. Is Brahman knowable or unknowable? If something is totally beyond material, beyond matter, how can we know him through our material indriyas? There's just that possibility does not exist at all. So in that sense, you could say Brahman is unknowable. How? Na chakshusha grihyate cannot be seen with material eyes. Napi vacha cannot be understood by words. This is an important concept that we have to understand. How much our scriptures we do, how much our satsang we do, everything is paroksha jnana. Okay, it is only the experiential knowledge of Paramatma that is called aparoksha jnana. What that experience for each one of us would be is up to us. That is the aparoksha jnana. But all that we are doing is paroksha jnana, and there is a limitations of words, including the Vedas. Vedas document the experience of rishis. And they are mere words for us because we haven't experienced that. They give us a direction. But at the end of the day, it is us who have to make the journey and we have to understand and get that aparoksha jnana. Okay. So when we understood that limitations of words, it becomes very important. We had a lot of discussions about this. Even the word, even the omkara signifies that, right? Akara, ukara, makara. Akara means Nishedavachakaha. He is Allah, he is Illa, he is Viruddha, he is Neti Neti, he is none of this. But he can be known. Why is he Neti Neti? Because he is Utkarsha, he is beyond matter. But he can be known through the Vedas as per our capacity. And that also is only paroksha jnana. Ultimately, we just need his grace to obtain that aparoksha jnana, which will also be based on our swarupa yogyata. Na anyair devaihi. This becomes important because here it says chakshusha and here it says vacha. And the very next word said anyair devaihi. So what we have to understand there is abhimani vyapadeshastu visesha anugatibhyam. So chakshus there means Surya. Vacha there means Agni, Parvati and so on. So these chaps cannot give us aparoksha jnana. With their grace, they might be able to guide us. That is all their role because they are not independent beings. Agni, Parvati, Surya, they are not independent beings. It's only the Vishnu who is the independent being. These guys can guide us. Okay? And they cannot give us the full knowledge of Paramatma as per our capacity. So, na anyair devaihi means that. Na tapasa. You may do austerities for thousands of years, you may still not see him. That is one way. The other one is tapasa, tapo abhimani. So here is a quick quiz. Who is the abhimani of tapas? Which devata is the abhimani of tapas? Rudra. Shiva is the abhimani of tapas. Okay. So Angirasa says even Rudra cannot show you, mate. Even he cannot show you the Paramatma. He can guide your mind. He can steady your mind if you pray to him. He can purify your mind if you pray to him. And that purification of mind will eventually lead to other things. Okay. So tapasa. Na karmanava. Even karmas, whatever yajnas that we do, we may not know him. But also the head of all the indriyas is Indra. As we know, Indra is the head of all indriyas. And karma indriyas, for example, he is the abhimani of your hand. And hand, we know, is the most highly evolved organs in a human body, which is the sadhana sharira. Even Indra can do that. So then the question is, why waste time with all this? So we had a discussion about that. Why waste time if we cannot know him through any of this, nor can the devatas show him? No. Immediately, we have to think about Shastra Yonitva, the third sutra of Brahma Sutra. Na avedavin manutetam brihantam sarva anubhum atmanam samparaye. Na indriyani na anumanam vedahi eva enam vedayanti tasmadahuhu vedaha. In Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya, Acharya says, Sadagamaika Vigneyam Samatita Ksharaksharam. Sadagamaika Vigneyam. He can be known through the Vedas as per our capacities. So, na chakshusha grhyate na pivacha na anyayir devair tapasa karmana va. We understood all the abhimani devatas. They can only guide us, but they cannot give us liberation. They cannot give us aparoksha jnana. Okay, the devatas who have been described here. Okay? Note the devatas: Ashwinis, Agni, Mitra, Yama, Daksha Prajapati, Swayambhu Manu, Upendra, Indra, Varuna, Chandra, Soma, Mitra, Surya. These are the guys who have been described. Except one guy, Jnana Prasadena. That becomes very, very important. So, who is this Jnana Prasada? Knowledge alone is not liberating. Okay, there is one school which has this view that knowledge alone is liberating. No, knowledge is a jada. It is not a sentient being. Knowledge cannot be liberating. Okay, so then what does this mean? What does Jnana Prasada mean? Jnana there means Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Yeah. Or yada pasyaha pasyate rukmavaranam hiranmaye pare koshe jyotirmayo. So these are all ideas of jnana, jnanamaya of Paramatma. So there jnana prasada in one view, jnana prasada means Bhagavat prasada, which means we need his grace. No matter how much we study, until we get his grace, nothing is going to happen. But there is another entity who is the second messenger. He is the messenger. Who is that messenger between the Paramatma and all the jivas? He is also called Jnana. Okay? He is also Jnana in the Upanishads. Okay? And also in various scriptures. For example, in Bhagavatam, Acharya points us to that. Jnana Rupena Vayuna. Okay? Among the jiva kotis, the highest jiva, among the jivas, the one that has the highest knowledge is Vayu. Jnana Rupena Vayuna. Why? Because in Bhagavatam, Brahma Vayu, Chaturmukha is saying this, Vijnana Shaktir Aham Asam Ananta Shaktehe. So Vayu says, I am Vijnana Shakti, but you are Ananta Shakti. What does that Vijnana Shakti means? Chaturmukha Brahma Vayu, the Rijus are the Abhimanis of Vijnanamaya Kosha. So there, Chaturmukha there reminds us, I am the Abhimani of Vijnanamaya Kosha, but you are the Ananta Shakti. So in Bhagavatam, there is a reference to what that Jnana actually means, which our Acharya Kher beautifully settles as Jnana Rupena Vayuna. Okay? Brahmana Paramajnana Rupena Harina Tata. And so there are two jnanas. One is Vayu, the other one is Hari. That Acharya settles for us. Okay. So that is the jnana prasada that we discussed about. Okay. Who is this jnana? Again, I just want to come here because the next verse actually talks about this prana tattva. As I said, all Upanishads talk about it, and Mundaka Upanishad is no exception. Mundaka Upanishad then in the last few verses of this Khanda talks about this prana tattva again and again. Jnana prasadena. Only by jnana prasada you will have aparoksha jnana. Okay. So we stopped at this point, jnana prasadena, 3 weeks ago. Then we still have to do these verses. Vishuddha sattvaha, tatastu sampashyate, nishkalam dhyayamanaha. These are all very, very clear, deep philosophical ideas of Vedantic philosophy. And what is that? What is it reminding us of? Let's spend the rest of the today's session thinking about this. Okay. So we understood that jnana prasada. So the jnana is jnana rupena vayuna. Who is this vayu? Isha Upanishad speaks a lot, isn't it? Vayur anilam amrutam idang basmantam shariram. Vayur anilam. This vayu is anila. He is called Matarishwa, and we in satsang we are the experts on this now about vayu, anila, amruta, etc. So asau, vayuhu, Matarishwa, satya, jnana, amruta, anila, they are all synonymous with this prana tattva. Okay. The highest in knowledge among the jivas. Our foremost guru, okay, is what we have that anusandhana. This the highest among the jivas is our guru. After all, our guru is what? A person who has knowledge higher than us, and he is able to impart the knowledge. And the highest among that is the prana tattva. And of course, Gita and Shvetashvatara Upanishad talk a lot about who this guru should be and so on. So what does this guru do for us? That is the new word for today. Vishuddha sattvaha. So what is jnana, this mukhya prana, this Vishnu by their grace, but primarily in this particular verse, jnana prasadena vishuddha sattvaha. So what this Vayu does for us, what does this second messenger does, what does our guru do for us? Vishuddha sattvaha. So what the messenger does is, he purifies your mind first, but ultimately he purifies the soul's swarupa indriyas. Matarishwa purifies our mind and soul, says the Upanishad. Yeah. Jnana prasadena vishuddha sattvaha. Vishuddha sattva, that is the next level. First you have jnana, then you have jnana's grace. By jnana's grace, what happens? Your mind is purified, but ultimately your jiva becomes pristine. You have self-realization. Okay. So what are the various ignorances? The dirt that covers the jiva. We know about paramachadika, jivachadika, sense of independence and identifying with your material body. These are the three primordial ignorance that we have. So who is going to tell us what is paramachadika and what is jivachadika? Quick quiz.
Ignorance of self and ignorance of Paramatma.
So, Jivachadika, thank you, Anandji, very good. Yeah, Jivachadika is the ignorance, Bhavarupa Jnana. We know we exist, but what is our inherent nature? We don't know that yet. Until we have self-realization, we will not have that. So that kind of ignorance is called Jivachadika. Paramachadika is, of course, we all have Paramachadika because that is the wheel of ignorance that covers the jivas, that we still don't know who this Antaryamana is at this point of time. Okay. The ignorance is on the soul. Okay. This is called Swarupa Ajnanavada. Okay. There is one school of Vedanta which unfortunately thinks it's Brahman who has ignorance. That's called Brahma Ajnanavada. Okay, so that is their problem. To say that Brahman is ignorant is sad philosophy in my view. Brahman cannot be ignorant. He is Sarvajnaha. How can he have ignorance? Yeah. The ignorance is on the jivas, and the jivas have to work out their salvation. This is the basic philosophy, which is what Angirasa is telling us. Jnana prasadena, once you have jnana prasada, vishuddha sattvaha there means jiva. Very, very clear difference that is being described here. Purity of mind, purity of soul needs to happen. That is, this jivachadika has to go. You should have that self-realization. Why? Because only a non-material entity can see the non-material Paramatma. Okay, this is basic stuff. Yeah, only a non-material jiva can see a non-material Paramatma. Okay, so that is what the verse is saying. Jnana prasadena vishuddha sattvaha. When the soul swarupa is all cleared up, this is the greatness of our Matarishwa. who is so celebrated in Isha Upanishad, that he actually, in his infinite grace, by giving us knowledge, he actually purifies us, purifies our mind, purifies the Jiva Swarupa, so that what? Tatastu tam pashyate. So that the Jiva then can see who? Nishkalam. Okay. That is the greatness of Matarishwa, or the Prana Tattva, that purifies us so that we become eligible at that point to see this Nishkalam. So that is the role of the second messenger, or the messenger in Vedantic philosophy. That is the greatness of this Prana Tattva, and we should be eternally grateful for that this Prana Tattva is doing this for us. But there are all the steps that we discussed just now. So when the mind is purified, the mind is still, completely purified, completely still, the Jiva Swarupa then wakes up. The Jiva Swarupa, the pure Jiva Swarupa wakes up, which is called the Suddha Sattva. Suddha Sattva there means the Jiva Swarupa. And the Jiva Swarupa then is able to see this Nishkalam. Okay? Who or what is Nishkalam? So this is an interesting new word for us. So before we spend the next half an hour thinking about it, who is going to tell us about what is kalas and what could be the Nishkala? So who wants to take this up? What are the kalas that we talk about?
16 colors.
16 kalas. Thank you, Neetaji. I was going to say 16 or 15. Anand?
The same Shodash Kalas, Prashna Upanishad.
Prashna Upanishad. Thank you. So this is our state. The jivas are all enveloped by these 15 fences around this, and the 16 entities, the jiva, isn't it? So this comes again and again in the Upanishads, which we should never forget, because everywhere it comes. So what are we doing? Na chakshusha gurhyate, na pivacha, na anyir devai tapasa karmanava, jnana prasadena, vishuddha sattvaha, tatastu tam pashyate nishkalam dhyayamanaha. Okay. When our prana or Matarishwa has purified us, we see the Nishkala. We are all bound by kalas. Jivas are all bound by kalas. And we know all these kalas, right? Shraddha, Vayu, Jyoti, Rapaha, Prithvi, Indriyam, Annam, Viryam, Tapo, Mantra, Karma, Loka, Nama. We are all surrounded by this. What does this mean? Okay, in the practical sense, this is the beauty of the Upanishad. For all of us who are in this samsara, okay, for all of us engaging in this samsara, doing all sorts of stuff, okay, let us take some guy. Let us take, okay, I'll take, for want of a better example, let me take Sushrut. Who wants to know, how do you recognize Sushrut in this material world? He's got a name. His name is Sushrut. He's got a fame. He's an orthopedic surgeon. Lokaha, he might have a lot of possessions. So when I introduce Sushrut in a party to somebody who's a third person, how do I introduce him? This is Shutrush. His name is this. He's got this profession. That is his action in life, and he's got all these properties. He is mantra. He speaks like this. His views are like this. He is strong person. He is a vegetarian. He eats only good food. These are all. He has all these nice sense organs, and he speaks very well. His mind always thinks like it. Yeah. So this is how we introduce a person, right? We introduce anybody in this world based on these material things that covers them. So that is what Prashna Upanishad, the 6th question, is actually talking about. That there are all these material identifications with which we introduce a person. Whereas our Vishnu is none of this. He's not entangled with Panchabhutas. He doesn't have material sense organs. Like you and me, he doesn't eat pizzas and pastas. And his thinking is entirely different types of thinking. He doesn't speak in English, at least from whatever we know. And his actions are not material. He doesn't have any of these material, affiliations. How are we going to introduce this person? He is beyond all this. So he is called Nishkalam. Okay? So this is a new word for us, that in the Upanishads, wherever we see Nishkalam, Nishkalam is a name of Paramatma, because he's got none of these fences. How to introduce a sea Brahman who is beyond all this? Okay, is a question. And if you can remember, we have also done Akayam. Okay, and he is also called Akayam. Akayam Lingavarjana. This Paramatma has got no Ligga Sharira, no material coverings at all. So he is also called Akayam in the Upanishads. He is called Nishkalam in the Upanishads. All the root of this is the Shodashakala Purushaha, and which we are fairly experts on this from the Prashna Upanishad. Okay? The Jiva is bound by these 15 fences, and these are material fences. And we are all recognized by others only by these 15 fences. If you think about it, whatever we do in our social life and professional lives, it all boils down to these 5. What do we believe in? What is our view of life? What is our view of whatever? That is called Shraddha. Yeah, all these things defines us. But this guy is beyond us. So that beyond this Nishkalam, our Matarishva will ensure that we get our mind is pure and we have our Vishuddha Sattva, and our Swarupa Chaitanya wakes up and we see this Nishkalam. Okay. How do we see this Nishkalam? In deep meditation or Asampragnata Samadhi, as we have discussed in Gita so much. Dhyayamanaha. Okay, so the sequence is very, very, very clear in the Upanishads. It all depends on how we see it. It has to be Pustaka, not Mastaka. If you do the Pustaka, what it is telling us, the root, the journey of souls is very, very, very clear. Matarishva purifies the mind. Matarishva ensures that the Jiva Swarupa is woken up. And then we see this Nishkalam how? In deep meditation. Asampragnata Samadhi. Okay, that is the essence of this verse. Na chakshusha grihyate, na pivacha, na anyair devaihi, tapasa karmanava, jnana prasadena vishuddha sattvaha, tatastu tam pashyate, nishkalam dhyayamanaha. How does that happen? This is a very, 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 one of the most important verses of this Kanda. Okay, this is a new concept. Think about all this Shodashakala Purushaha. Each one has an Abhimani. Jiva Abhimani. The 16th is the Jiva. Prana is the Abhimani of the Jiva as described in Prashna Upanishad. And we are talking about this Jnana. Who is this Prana or the Vayu or the Matarishva? Who is being celebrated? This guy has to give you grace, mate. This guy has to purify your mind. This guy has to purify your Swarupa Indriyas. He has to wake your Swarupa Indriya up. He has to lead you to self-realization and so on. So the question is, how does Matarishva do this? How does the Jivas get their self-realization? Okay, so this is a deep philosophical idea. How do the Jivas get their self-realization? Yes, there is the divine grace that is always there. But even for the divine grace to happen, there is a messenger who makes that happen as well. That is what this Upanishad talks about. Yeah. Yeshaha anuratma chetasa veditavyaha yasmin pranaha panchada samvivesha pranaihi chittam sarvamotam prajananam yasmin vishuddhe vibhabati yesha atma. That is the next verse, which is a very, very important verse as to why the practitioners of Vedanta, Tattvavadins, give so much importance to this Prana Tattva. Not a hypothetical thing or a sentimental rubbish, because it comes from the Vedas, it comes from the Upanishads. This particular verse in the Mundaka Upanishad, and our gurus teach us that you will not find a similar verse in other Upanishads. And as you know, in 10 Upanishads. Why do we need to study 10 Upanishads? We need to study 10 Upanishads because different concepts and ideas are packaged in different Upanishads. So if we study all the 10 Upanishads, then we will have an overarching view of what's going on here. So this is one such verse you will not find in the other verse. Okay, so let's see if we can tackle this over the next 20 minutes or 21 minutes that we have. Yeshaha. Who is this Yeshaha? This Nishkalam. So our Angirasa is now trying to talk a little bit more about this Nishkalam. So this Nishkalam is Yeshaha Anuratma. So this Nishkalam is Anuratma. Anuratma means, think about this. This is an interesting word, Anu and Atma. And we have done this in Katha Upanishad, right? Anoraniyan, Mahato Mahiyan, Na Atma Asya Jantor Nihito Guhayam. Anoraniyan. If Anu is the Jiva, he is inside the Jivas itself as its Antaryamin. So he is subtler than the subtlest. So he is called Anuratma. Yeshaha Anuratma. And there is an interesting etymology that I want to remind you of. Atma. Okay. Atma, the English word atom. Okay. The English word atom comes from the Sanskrit word Atma. Atom means very, very small. Okay. And Atma means very, very small. Anuratma, he is smaller than even the smallest atoms that you can think. Say, for example, our Acharya reminds us, Paramanu Pradeshepi Ananta Jivarasayaha. Even in the space inside the atoms, there are lots, there are infinite jivas. And inside each jiva is this Antaryamin. So that is the view there. Anuratma. He is everywhere inside all the jivas. How do you see him? How do you know him? Chetasa Veditavyaha. Okay, so this needs to be combined with Vishuddha Sattvaha in the previous verse. This Vishuddha Sattvaha, when the Jiva Swarupa is woken up, that is called Chetasa. Chaitanya, Jiva Chaitanya is called Chetasa. Okay. Chetasa Veditavyaha. This Anuratma, who is your Antaryamin, can be known only by the Jiva Swarupa or the Jiva Chaitanya, is what Angirasa is saying. And that is what Aparoksha Jnana is, isn't it? There can be no confusions there. Chetasa Veditavyaha. He can be known only by Jiva Swarupa or Chaitanya knows or sees. Veditavyaha. How does this happen? How can this Jiva Swarupa know him or can be woken up? The next verse is extremely important for this contemplation. That Jiva Swarupa or Chaitanya is woken up, is purified by whom? Yasmin Pranaha Panchada Samvivesha. This prana has gone, is inside the Jiva in his 5 forms. 5 forms of prana is present in the Jiva Swarupa or Chaitanya. What are those 5 forms? Prana, Udana, Vyana, Samana, Apana. What does he do in these 5 forms inside the Jiva Chaitanya? He takes the Jiva to Paramatma. He lifts the Jiva's consciousness towards Paramatma. He shows the various aspects of Vivida Rupa. He shows various aspects of his Antaryamin to the Jiva. Samana, Samyak. He shows that in as pristine capacity as it's possible as per the Yogyata of the Jiva. Apana, he removes all the ignorance. That is what the Upanishad is saying, which is an Apaurushaya Veda. Okay. Yasmin pranaha panchada samvivesha. Okay, so if there is one point we all need to contemplate on from today's satsang, I would humbly submit that this is the verse. Yeshaha anuratma chetasa veditavyaha yasmin pranaha panchada samvishesha. So for those exalted souls who are in that journey of souls from Paroksha Jnana, they are getting that grace of this Jnana or the Matarishwa. He does this for you in his 5 forms. He wakes you up. He wakes up your Swarupa Chaitanya so that you see him. Okay. This is what this Hanumanta's description is all about. When Hanumanta opens up his chest, there is Rama and Sita there, or Narayana and Lakshmi there. What does that mean? The Antaryamin who is inside the prana is shown to us. Who shows this? This Hanumanta, Mati, as he is celebrated in Balikta Sukta, he opens it and shows it to us. That is why we have to worship this second messenger, this messenger of us called the Matarishwar Prana, who is so celebrated in the Upanishads. Some schools of Vedanta don't even know this because they've got Mastaka reading into the Pustaka, not the Pustaka and understanding what the Pustaka is saying. When you see what the Vedas are saying, this is what they're saying. Yeshaha, Anuratma, Chetasa, Veditavyaha, Yasmin, Pranaha, Panchada, Samvivesha. Next time you see Hanumanta with this, think about this. And also in many of our Mangalacharana slokas, we say Bharati Ramana Mukhya Pranantargata. Okay, anybody wants to tell us that? So, if Veena ji is there in the call, do you want to tell that particular Mangala Charana that we do for everything, Veena ji? If you're there, can you just remind us what it means? Or if Veena ji is not there, maybe Neeta or Anand?
This one. Okay.
Yeah.
Is this one you Shri Hanuma Bhima Madhvantargata Ramakrishna Veda Vyasatmaka Shri Lakshmi Hayagrivaya Namah. So that is
Yeah,
where
thank you, Neetaji. So there also, we say this all the time without realizing where the evidence for this comes from. Bharati Ramana Mukhya Pranantargata. Okay. Lakshmi Ramana. So that's how we say this, right? Why do we say this? It comes from this verse. Yeshaha Anuratma Chetasa Veditavyaha Yasmin Pranaha Panchada Tamvivesha. So that is again, our gurus remind us, this is the Vedic interpretation of this verse. Okay? That we have to think about this Jiva. Inside the Jiva Prana Tattva, who is doing all this work for us, and inside the Prana Tattva, that is inside Hanumanta, is Lakshmi Narayana. The other way of looking at this, which is a superficial way of looking at it, but it is that interpretation is also there, is Yeshaha Anuratma, this subtle Paramatma, Chetasa Veditavyaha. God can be known by constant contemplation by the mind. Shravana, Manana, Dhyana, they are all Shravana, Manana, Dhyana are the activities of the mind. Yeah, can be known by constant contemplation of the mind. Yasmin pranaha panchada samvishesha, in whom, that is the God, the 5 forms of prana have taken refuge. That is another view of taking. So everybody is dependent on this Paramatma, including the 5 forms of prana. That God can be known only through contemplation by the mind, which is the interpretation of Chetasa Veditavyaha as one view, which is a superficial view that our gurus remind us. The deep philosophical view is this thing that this Prana Tattva is doing. Tasmin Apo Matarishwa Dadati. If you think about that in Isha Upanishad, this Matarishwa offers all the good karmas that we do to Paramatma. Similarly, this Matarishwa, Yasmin Pranaha Panchada Samvivesha, he creates Vishuddha Sattvaha for us. He purifies our mind. He does a lot of stuff. We have to be very grateful for all the things that Prana is doing. But sadly, we have forgotten. Right? So, that is for the exalted souls who are reached the stage of Aparoksha Jnana, where this Prana Tattva is playing a role. Not only that, Pranaihi Chittam Sarvamotam Prajananam. Look at that word. Pranair Chittam Sarvam Otam Prajananam. Prajananam Sarvam Chittam Pranaihi Otam. Okay, so this, as I said, Chittam is Vijnanamaya Kosha. And we have just done this, right? Vijnana Shakti Rahamasam Ananta Shaktehe. So this Vijnanamaya Kosha guy holds all the prajas together, the Chittam and everything he is holding, even in their material bodies. Not only in the Swarupa Indriyas he is playing this role, but also in their material coverings in Vijnanamaya Kosha, this guy is helping and holding. And doing what? Yasmin Vishuddhe Vibhavati Yesha Atma. Yeah. So what does that mean in that sense? Pranai. So again, we have to go back to Mundaka Upanishad and look at internal evidence. So if you may remember, Shapta Pranaha Prabhavanti Tasmat, Sapta Archishaha, Samidaha, Sapta Homaha, Sapta Ime Lokaha, Yeshu Charanti Pranaha, Guhashaya, Nihitaha, Sapta. You remember those words? Sapta, Kaundinya Shruti, Dvadashava Eta Pranaha, Indriyas. Okay. Prana holds all the Indriyas. That is another way of looking at this verse. Prana holds all the Indriyas together, and Prana is held by Pranasya Pranaha, who is Paramatma himself. And we've again done this Prana in the Chandogya, Prashna, Upanishad, and so on. There is all these discussions about all the Abhimani Devatas who think that they are independent, but then they realize that they are actually dependent on Prana. And that prana is dependent on pranasya pranaha. Remember that prana of Prashna Upanishad, prana of Chandogya Upanishad, they talk about this idea of prana holding all the indriyas. Pranaihi chittam sarvam otam prajananam. This prana does every damn thing for us, but we have forgotten, okay? Which is our primary problem. Yasmin Vishuddhe Vibhavati Yesha Atma. This Matarishva purifies our mind and soul, which leads to what? Vibhavati Visheshataha Drishto Bhavati. Visprashtam Drishto Bhavati. What does it that we see? The clear image of this Paramatma who is our Intaryamin as per our capacity. Depending on the Swarupa Yogyata, we see this Paramatma. Visheshataha Drishto Bhavati. He says this Paramatma, Antaryamin, so many aspects. Visprashtam, clear, as per the clarity, as per his Yogyata. Who? Yesha Atma. So, Yesha Anuratma Chetasa Veditavyaha Yasmin Pranaha Panchada Samvivesha. The most important verse. Pranai Chittam Sarvamotam Prajananam Yasmin Vishuddhe Vibhavati Esha Atma. So when we get the Aparoksha Jnana, then what happens? We ultimately get the liberation as well, isn't it? So we are in Satya Loka. Once we have had Aparoksha Jnana, finished our karma, then we go to this Matarishwa itself. We go to Matarishwa Loka and hang out there. Okay? Let's not forget that Matarishwa does all this for us, and then we go and hang out with him in Satya Loka. And then eventually we jump on to the non-material plane, which is the liberation, says the Vedas. So the Aparoksha Jnana ultimately results to liberation. What happens there? Yam yam lokam manasa samvibhati vishuddha sattvaha kamayate yamshta kaman tam tam lokam jayate tamshta kaman tasmat atmajnam hi archayed bhuti kamaha. Beautiful, beautiful verse. So in liberated said, whatever the jiva thinks, that happens. Whatever he desires, he will attain. He becomes an apta kama and he can go wherever. The Shastra says, you may be sitting in the material, in the trans-empirical world, and you say, look, I want to check out what Chaturmukha is doing right now. You can do that. That is what the Veda says. You can do anything. You have so much, empowerment that is given by to the jivas by this in the state of liberation, that wherever you want to go, yam yam lokam manasa samvibhati, even you just need to think, I want to go there. With your Visuddha Sattva, kamaye yamshta kaman. If you have that desire, you will reach it. Tam tam lokam jayate tamshta kaman. You will go attain whatever you want. Whatever desires he desires, he attains all those worlds and desires. That is the benefit of attaining Aparoksha Jnana and then going to liberation. So Angirasa then says, therefore, my dear Shuanaka, tasmat, therefore, Atmajnam hi archayet. Atmajnam hi archayet. Worship the foremost Guru. Yeah. Worship only the Guru who has the knowledge of this Atma. Atmajnam. Jnam means knowledge. Atma means Paramatma. He worship only those fellows, not the fake gurus of the modern times, who are all, they may have beards and they may be dressed up in fancy clothes. Are they really Atmajnam? Think about this very carefully, says Angirasa. You have to decide who that guru is. Who is this Atmajnam? He archayet. To know even who is the Atmajnam, we have to go to the Vedas and the Upanishads. And they have already celebrated so much about this Matarishva, Anila, Vayu, and so on. So the view there is you have to worship only that Guru, that foremost Guru. Tadviddi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshante te jnanam jnaninaha tattvavada darshinaha Yasya deve parabhaktihi yata deve tata gurau tasya ete katitahi artaha prakashyante mahatmanaha. Yeah. So this becomes very important, where Angirasa says, please select your gurus carefully. Go for the chap that has a knowledge of the Atma. Atmajnam hi archayet. Okay. Why do you need to worship only this Atmagnyam? That is the next question. Why do I can't worship any fake gurus? I can do 2 weeks of course. I can pay some 15,000 pounds or whatever and have a good food, do some crazy meditations and all these asanas and then feel good about it, etc., etc. No, that is all on material plane, guys, says Angirasa. You have to do this Atmajnam hi worshipping. Why? If you have the desire for bhuti, bhuti kamaha. Bhuti means what? To elevate yourself. That is why jivas are called bhutas, right? We are called as jivas or called bhutas because we have the capacity to elevate ourselves. So here Angirasa says, if you have a desire or a wish to elevate yourself, then Atmajnam hi archayet. Okay. So he actually closes this section on a very high note, talking about how important this prana tattva is, how important these 5 forms of prana, apana, vyana, udana, samana in the jiva swarupa cleanses the jiva and takes him to the Paramatma and makes him see the Paramatma. That is what he does. And the same prana tattva at the end of at the end of this creation, he takes us to cross the Viraja Nadi and then go to the transempirical plane. This guy is doing everything for us, this prana tattva, says the Upanishad. So on that is why the Upanishads are very clear about whom we should worship. Atmajnam hi archaye, not the ones who think they themselves are God, but the ones who know who this Paramatma is. Worship him because he will take you to this Paramatma. Is very clear statement from Angirasa. And hold on to this idea because I just want to introduce that for the next 3 or 4 minutes that we have, and then we'll pick it up in the next in the next satsang as to what the final kanda of the Upanishad is just going to talk about. Iti Mandukya Upanishadi Tritiya Mundake Pratama Kandaha Samaptam. So we finish the Pratama Kandaha with this verse. What is the benefit of liberation? Yam yam lokam manasa samvibhati vishuddha sattvaha kamayate yamshta kaman tam tam lokam jayate tamshta kaman tasmat atmagnyam hi archayet bhuti kamaha. And then it goes to the next kanda, which has got about 11 verses, which hopefully over the next 4 to 6 weeks, we should finish some of these verses. We are all experts already on some of these concepts, so we should be able to navigate this pretty easily. Saveda etat paramam brahmadama yatra vishwam nihitam bhati shubram upasate purusham yehi akamaste Sukram yetat ativartanti diraha is the very next verse. And I just want to close at least one idea here, which is a natural, beautiful progression of what we have discussed about this prana, 5 forms of prana, who is purifying everything. And then the last verse is Atmajnam hi archayet. Why do you need to worship this Atmajnam? That is the next question. Why on earth? Why can't I worship these fake gurus of the modern times? And there are many of those, including in Bharatvarsha. Everywhere they are there. Why should I only focus on Atmajnam hi archayet? Why? Saha Veda Etat Paramam Brahma Dhama. That is the clarification that Angirasa gave. And we'll close this with what that means. Saha means Atmajnarchakaha, that person who is worthy of our worship because he has got Atmajna. Atmajnarchakaha, he knows what etad, this, that is very close. Etad, as you know, is that which is very close. What is that? Paramam Brahma Dhama. Dhama means abode. Brahma means Paramatma or God. His highest abode. That Atmagyam, the gurus of the modern times. So we need to be very careful. That is what Angirasa is saying. Check those gurus out. Do they actually know who is the highest abode of Paramatma? Okay. That is Sa Veda Etat Paramam Brahmadama. Paramam, highest. Brahma, God, abode. Which is the highest or the most celebrated abode of Paramatma? Hamsa Suchishat Vasu Antarikshasat. Hamsa Gayatri of Katha Upanishad clearly will tell you that. Hamsaha Suchishat. Hamsa, Hamsaramaka Paramatma, Vishnu, Antaryamin. He is inside Shuchi, pure being. Who is the pure being? The Upanishads celebrate this as Prana Tattva or Vayu or Chaturmukha Brahma. Ham Saha, that Prana, Ham inspiration, Saha expression. That is one view of looking at it. This inside this Hamsa is this real Hamsa who is Paramatma. That Hamsa is called Suchi. He is the purest of beings. Vayur Anilam Amrutam Ata Idang Basmantam Anila. Why is this Prana Tattva called Anila by Swayambhu Manu in Isha Upanishad? And Anila, we know, is the name of Hanumanta. Hanuman is called Anila. There are many folks who have Anila as their names. I don't know whether they know the meaning of that word. But let us think about it. Anila, Nila, Aha iti Brahma, Aitarehu Upanishad. Aha, means Brahma, Vishnu. Nila, Brahma's, Vishnu's Nila, in the sense Vishnu is inside him. That is why he is called Anila. The highest celebrated being is called Anila. And today I was doing a lot of research on this particular verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. Vayor Mukhyadiya, says Srimad Bhagavatam. When that Uddhava conversation is going on, the Bhagavatam says this, Vayoho Mukhyadiya. And I've seen some transliteration, sad transliteration, where they've said Vayo means wind. He is inside wind. Is that a philosophy to talk about? No, that is such a superficial interpretation. I was so sad to see those kind of rubbish transliterations that are out there. Vayo Mukhyadiya means Vayu, Va, Aya, Vu. That person who has the highest levels of Bala and knowledge among the Jiva Koti, who is celebrated as Anila, who is celebrated as Suchi, who is celebrated as Prana, who is celebrated as Matarishva. This Paramatma is Mukhyadiya. The highest, the most celebrated presence of Paramatma, Pratika of Paramatma is inside this Prana Tattva. Sarva Devottamo Vayuriti Jnana Nachara Param. Priyamasti Harehe Kinchit Tata Vayor Harer Vidaha. In Bhagavata Tatparya Nirnaya of Acharya. So that is where Angirasa is taking us. Saveda Yetat Paramam Brahmadama. Go and seek that Guru who knows that the highest abode of Paramatma is this Prana Tattva. And there are empty number of evidences in the Upanishads. They all talk the same thing. Hamsaha, Anilaha. Never forget Anilaha. When you think about Anila, you go to Vayu. And then think about Mukhyadaya. Vayu, Mukhyadaya. Anilaha. Hamsas Suchihi. Saveda Etat Paramam Brahma Veda. Okay. The next verse, we'll take it up in the next class, which says Yatra Vishwam Nihitam Bhati Shubram. So what does that mean? Yatra Vishwam Nihitam Bhati Subram. In that Prana Tattva is this Vishwam. He is inside this Nihitam. Yatra there means in that Prana Tattva, in that Paramam Brahmadama, this Brahman is called Vishwam. He is called Nihitam. He is inside the Prana Tattva. He is called Vishwam. And he is also Bhati Shubram. So that Vishwam there becomes very important there. This Antaryamin now is celebrated as Vishwam. Okay, so next week, think about this question and we'll pick it up in the next sentence. Vishnu Sahasranama starts off, the very first word is Vishwam. Okay, we need to think about why did Veda Vyasa put Vishwam as the first word? He could have put something at rest. He could have put Vashatkaraha, Vishwam, Vishnu. No, he put Vishwam, Vishnu, Vashatkaraha. Why those sequences? That itself becomes very interesting when we contemplate at that level, which is what our gurus tell us to do. Never do this superficial scratching of the surface. Vishwam is also a name of Matarishva. Prana is also called Vishwam in the Upanishad. So, this Vishwam is there in the Upanishads. Then this Vishnu Sahasranama celebrates this Paramatma as Vishwam. Okay? We'll have to think about why that is the case. And we have just done our Parashurama Kshetra Yatra 2-3 weeks ago, and we have driven through these places, Adur, where this egoistic Panditas were asking Acharya that question. And we'll talk about that as well. What was that question? The egoistic Panditas who thought that they'd read all the Vedas, Acharya said, look, Vedas have 3 meanings, Gitas have 10 meanings, Vishnu Sahasranama has got 100 meanings. So these Panditas, the egoistic Panditas said, oh, is that so? Can you actually explain to us? Take one word and give us the 100 meanings of that. Acharya took Vishwam. And he started reciting, okay, here is the meaning of Vishwam. If you guys can catch up with me, you can repeat it with me. So he started giving the meanings of Vishwam, 50 meanings of Vishwam first, and then stopped and said, now guys, can you repeat all these meanings? These egoistic Panditas, and there were quite a few in those days, they surrendered to Acharya at that time when he gives the meaning of Vishwam. So let us also think about what that Vishwam actually means. What are all the meanings that Acharya has given us about that Vishwam, which is the very first of Vishnu Sahasranama, because that Vishwam is inside the Vishwam, which is Matarishva, who is celebrated here. Okay? Saveda etat paramam brahmadama yatra Vishwam nihitam bhati shubhram. Okay, so these are all profound verses of the Upanishads that actually takes us to very high levels of philosophy, which is what we should be doing. And that is what we are doing in our satsangs, to think about why do we say Bharati Ramana Mukhya Prana Antargata Lakshmi Ramana? Why do we say that? What is this Prana Tattva? Where is this? What are all the great things it is doing? So why we should celebrate this and so on. And again, I want to close today's session to remind folks, so this is not some sentimental rubbish. These are all the languages of the Upanishads, and our acharyas actually give us the philosophy, Pustaka philosophy. As it is there in the Vedas, they are giving us this philosophy. And it is up to us whether we are going to read Upanishads with preconceived ideas or as the Upanishads are telling us through a Guru Mukha. Okay, so that is where we have to make our decision. If we need to find the right destination, we need a Guru, we need a messenger who can take us. Okay, and for some of us, that messenger is the Matarishva, who is going to do that for us. Okay, so on that note, I'll close today's session. Lots of deep ideas that we discussed. Krishna Pranamastu. If there are any questions, we can take it up now.
Namaskar, Masterji.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Pratibhaji, go for it, and then Anand. Yeah, Pratibhaji, go for it.
When we are trying to meditate, we need to think about Matarishwa, and inside that is the Paramatma and Jivatma, is it? Like the Dvasuparna, or inside the Jiva is the Mukhya Prana, and inside the Mukhya Prana is the Paramatma.
So your second one is the right one to think about it. So that is how you meditate. So you have the Jiva. Inside the Jiva is the Prana Tattva. Inside the Prana is the Paramatma.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pratibhaji. Anand?
So Madhuji, when we say prana cleanses the soul and the mind, so it is not the mind as in jada. So it is the mind of the soul. I mean, the Swarupa mind.
Yeah.
So if that is the case, it's already pure, isn't it? Or
Yeah. Good point, Anandji. Yes, the Jiva Swarupa cannot be changed. But the idea there is that Jivachadika that is there, that Paramachadika that is there, the dirt of the Jiva Swarupa that is there, that needs to be cleansed. So the classic example that our gurus tell us is, you remember that verse in the second chapter, Aprameyasya Tasmad Yuddhasva Bharata. So if you want to recite that particular verse, Anashinaha aprameyasya tasmad yuddhasva bharata is the second line for that. So that's a twist for the first line. If you look at that particular verse, so there is this bimba and the pratibimba that is being discussed in that context. Okay, so there is something called the reflecting medium or the upadhi. What is that upadhi? The Jiva Swarupa itself is the upadhi. The Jiva Swarupa has got a lot of dirt on it through the Linga Sharira. It has got all this Jivachadika and Paramachadika. Who needs to wipe and clean it? So that is what is being discussed here. And also, as you said, there is the Jiva Swarupa also has its own Indriyas and Manas and so on. So those things need to be woken up, right? So that is how you look at it. That is the removal of all this dirt on the Linga Sharira and the Jiva Swarupa that needs to be woken up once this Jivachadika has been removed. Of course, Paramatma is the independent entity that removes the Jivachadika and Paramachadika, but the mediator, the messenger who does on behalf of Paramatma, according to these verses in the Atharvana Upanishad, is this prana in his 5 forms he does it. So I hope that clarifies that, but it needs I do agree. So there's that it needs a bit of a manana to try and think about what is it that the Upanishad is saying. Thank you, Anand.
So does the mind, like we say, mind has 5 layers. So does the mind of the Jiva Swarupa also has 5 layers?
So according to, so there are 2 indriyas, right? So the view, this is a very Tattvavada view. So there is the material components, there is a non-material. So the Tattvavada philosophy will say, look, the indriyas and the mind. So there is something called the material mind. The material mind has got 5 components. So those material minds are non-eternal indriyas. Okay, and similarly, your Jiva Swarupa has also got the mind, and that mind also has got the various components, and they are eternal indriyas. Your Jiva Swarupa also has got eyes and everything else, but they are all non-material, eternal indriyas is the Tattvavada view. So, Anandji, it's a very important question because this particular kanda, as we navigate through these verses, the penultimate verse actually talks about this, and Badarayana takes it up in his Brahma Sutra as well, as to what happens to all the Abhimani Devatas. When they go to liberation, what happens? Are there Abhimani Devatas in the Jiva Swarupa and all that? So that is a deeper level of contemplation that happens. But there are that idea, and what you say is also absolutely right, that the Swarupa Indriya, Swarupa Manas, it may have 5 components, but again, the 5 components of the Swarupa Indriya is non-different from the Jiva itself. There is no difference there. It is non-different, but for our contemplation, we say, oh, this is the manas, this is the indriya or the swarupa indriya. But actually, the swarupa eyes is non-different from the jiva itself. Hope that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Excellent. So if there are no further questions, thank you very much for joining the satsang again. So it's glad to be back and start it off in a full bang, as it were, going straight into the hardcore philosophy of Vedanta. And hopefully, as I said, over the next 3 or 4 sessions, we should, hopefully with God's grace and of course Matarishwa's grace, we should be able to finish it. And then we can make Pravesha to Keno Upanishad, where it says, that is another beautiful Upanishad, conversation between Rudra and Chaturmukha Brahma, where Rudra is Chaturmukha Brahma's student and Rudra is asking various questions, and our Chaturmukha Brahma is answering all those questions on our behalf. So that's a beautiful Upanishad that we will tackle. So on that note, Hare Krishna, Krishna Pranamastu. Take care, everyone. We'll catch up next week.
Shri Gurubhyo Namah.